We want to thank our summit sponsor, Teach Beyond. Teach Beyond is a global mission organization providing transformational education services in over 70 countries around the world. Teach Beyond sees Christ centered education as a powerful force for the transformation of individuals and societies. There are countless opportunities to be a part of kingdom work around the world, serving full time overseas, part time from your home, or short term on a school break. Want to learn more and get involved? Visit teachbeyond.org/go to explore opportunities. That's teachbeyond.org/go. Now, enjoy the summit session.
Hello, Rise Up. I'm so excited that you're here joining us for this session. This session is very near dear to my heart. I should probably introduce myself first. My name is David Schmoos. I'm with Christian Educators. I'm here with Michelle Kiesel. I'll tell you all about her and introduce her in a second here. But you've come for meeting students' emotional needs using the 5 love languages. And let me just tell you, the 5 love languages have been very near and dear to my heart, just as a part of my awareness growing up and developing how to love people. For me, many of us, of course, apply the love languages to our marriages, and I'm assuming many of you are already familiar with the love languages. I learned pretty early on that my wife's love language was gifts. And that is definitely not mine. And so like many of you, I'm sure we've had to learn how to love someone in a way that we're not used to being loved, or we don't necessarily appreciate as much as being loved. But our students, of course, all have these unique love languages, and Michelle is here to tell us about that. Let me tell you a little bit about Michelle. Michelle is just a joy and a delight. I work with Michelle on a daily basis. She is both our Arizona team lead here at Christian Educators, as well as our student engagement specialist. That means that she helps network with students, future teachers, all over the country, and to help them and equip them and encourage them in their calling as educators. So she also is a adjunct professor at Grand Canyon University. So she's in the classroom in a sense, and in that sense, and mentoring these future teachers as well. So Michelle, we are delighted to have you with us.
Well, am delighted to be here. Thank you for this opportunity to share something that I am equally passionate about in terms of application to my personal life as well as my professional life.
Michelle, I'm curious, how did this topic become of interest to you?
Well, I'll go into that even a little more in the presentation, but I discovered it when it first came out, and I began making application in my marriage and then to our children. And I got so used to doing this that it just naturally flowed into my professional life and with my students.
Yeah, it's like once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? I mean, okay, my husband or my wife works this way now. Oh, we all work this way, and how does yeah, totally, I get that. All right, well, all right, Michelle, why don't we have you take it away? I'm so excited for this topic. I'll be praying as you teach, because I'm so excited for our Rise Up audience to get to hear this. So go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Again, delighted to be here. Welcome to Transforming Student Learning using the 5 love languages. I'm so excited to share this session with you, and I really pray that it is a blessing to you and your practice. And as David mentioned, chances are you've heard of it, you've practiced it, but did you know that you can use these languages in your classroom to meet the needs of your students, the emotional security they need, the acceptance, the love? This session, I believe, is going to bless you with information and ideas on how you can use love languages as a tool with your students, resulting in improved student-teacher relationships, positive student feedback or response to teacher feedback and correction, and increase student motivation. So who doesn't want that with their students? And so I'm very passionate about this topic for many reasons, but it really starts with this, because in 1 John 4, it tells us that our ability to love begins with Jesus. And as Christians, we can be the best at loving one another because we've received the best love. And we are the model of how to love our families, our friends, our coworkers, and yes, our students better than anyone else. So let's talk about love. Many years ago, when I was teaching young children, I bent down on my knee, I looked them in the eye, and I said to a couple of students, What is love? One student asked, do I need to sound it out? Well, that was really a proud moment for me because I was teaching my students phonics at the time. One student replied to the question, what is love? Love. A sweet little girl said, well, it's something in your heart. And one of my boys, he shrugged his shoulders and he said, I don't know. I don't think any child's answer was the same, because just as children would describe love differently, students perceive love differently. And knowing their perception, and that's an important word, of love allows us to make authentic connections with our students so they feel loved. Now, the 5 Love Languages was written in the 1990s by Christian author Gary Smalley, bringing really revelation to the church, right, on how to effectively express love. And again, as I began to practice these principles, I just naturally got accustomed to loving my students in this way. And I found so much success, I can't help but want to share it with others. And so, like you, I have learned the language of teachers. Now, if you're with a group of teachers, you know that you're going to hear words like implementation, modification, individualization, differentiation, accommodations, and the list of shuns goes on, does it not? But you know, these words are unique. They're meaningful to us and how they relate to educating students. Well, in a similar way, each of us has a unique language, a language that means something to us. And as we recognize the love languages in others, we learn to speak their language. And so the best description of love language is a God-given bent in our personality that allows us to receive love in such a way that our emotional tank gets filled up, allowing us to experience love and to feel loved. Now, there's another common word in our profession. It's assessment. Yes, assessment. And I'm sure you'd agree that the more that we know about our students' academic progress, the better we can meet their individual and unique academic needs. Well, likewise, we can assess through observation the love language our student most likely has. Now, at the start, I want to emphasize something, and I think this is really important. I'm just sharing one of many tools in your teacher toolbox. All right, this should not feel like one more thing to do. This is knowledge that can be used when needed as a practical tool for addressing a student's need for love. Now, something that we all do in our teaching practice to help our students remember something is provide a visual illustration. And so for the purpose of this illustration, our students, well, they're the vehicle. We know that a vehicle must have gasoline in its tank to go. Now, I know this doesn't work if you drive a Tesla. Just remember what it was like before you had one. But without gas, a vehicle is unable to move. And even though the car could be mechanically sound, maybe it even looks great on the outside. And so likewise, if the love tank of our students is running on fumes, they may stop moving. And like a vehicle, this tank will run out, and it does need to be refilled. So, Kingdom Educators, here's my question for you today. Can you fuel the love? And the answer is yes, you can. And I'm going to show you how to do this with simplicity. So where are we going on this journey to learn how to apply love languages in our classroom? Well, first, we are going to look at 3 things. How is the language described? What student behaviors indicate their primary love language? And how can students perceive if a student is on empty? In the next, for each love language, we're going to discover specific actions we can take within our classroom to fuel up the love tanks of our students. Then we're going to connect our learning to how we can impact individual students. And we're going to end with personal application, prayer points, and preparation. Are you ready to go? Okay, buckle up, put on your seatbelts, because we're taking the freeway. So let's begin with physical touch. Jesus modeled the importance of physical touch in Mark 10 when the disciples assumed Jesus was too busy or too important for the kids. When they tried to shoo the children away, Jesus responded by saying, "Let the children come to me." And he took them in his arms. He placed his hand on them and he blessed them. Now, I understand that this language needs to be put in the context of the student-teacher relationship. And I'm going to do this after we answer 3 questions. The first question is, what is physical touch when described as a love language? Well, a student with this as their primary love language welcomes hugs, holding hands, cuddles, and clearly there are appropriate limitations of physical touch in the classroom. But for students who crave a physical point of connection, they need us to find ways to fill this need. Now, the second question, what student behaviors may indicate this is a primary love language? Students with this love language demonstrate behaviors such as following you, standing too close, even when it's not desirable. I bet that's happened to you. These students are often the ones that you get to say this phrase to. Please keep your hands to yourself, even though their touch may not be aggressive, but inappropriate. These are the boys that excessively that wrestle, they're jostling, chest bumps. The girls whose flirtations with boys include standing maybe a little too close, touching arms or hands when talking. And these students, they're often unaware of what we describe as personal space. The third question is this: how can I perceive if my student is running on empty? Well, noticing students who touch their peers a lot when they're walking by their desk or when they're sitting next to them, or they're continually moving into your or their peers' physical space when asked not to, this can be an indication. These behaviors may indicate that they're subconsciously craving the expression of love that best meets their emotional need for affection. And if your student withdraws or is having a difficult day and then you take time just to sit close by and their face lights up, it may be because they were on empty. So how does this work in the classroom? Well, these are some general suggestions that may need adaptations for the grade level you teach or the environment of your particular school and how it embraces interactions with students. But here we go. For students who perceive love described as physical touch, a gentle pat on the back, the shoulder, while leaning over their desk to look at their work or talking with them can quickly move that empty gauge up. A high five or a knuckles can be part of a physical connection and very appropriate in multiple learning situations. A special handshake as part of the morning greeting or end of the day goodbye can be a physical point of connection that calms a student needing to be loved because they came to school on an empty tank or they're ending the school day on empty. Simple proximity to a student or acceptance of their close proximity. If they touch your arm or your hand when nearby and you allow it, this can help to mitigate a student's negative feelings if they're craving physical touch. Now, before we move on, let me make 3 quick points that I think we need to remember. First, when we recognize a child's love tank is moving on empty, speaking their love language often avoids a confrontation of negative emotions and actions. And that's a good thing for teachers. Second, when students come to class with an empty tank, when we make an effort to mitigate their emotional depletion early in the day, we can just set them up for success. And third, after a student receives a consequence or he has a negative learning experience, mistreated by peers, our efforts to speak love aligned to their primary language can be a reboot, helping them to re-engage with learning or their peers. Now, when I reflect on purposefully and intentionally loving my students who demonstrated physical touch as their love language, I think of Lily. She was always behind me and next to me when she should have been someplace else. She needed redirection when it came to physical proximity, touching her peers. When she was isolated, she became very agitated. Well, one day she lost it. She ran out of the room, eventually was caught, brought to the office. Fortunately, I had a break. I was able to go where she was detained by one of our coaches. She was still reeling when the Holy Spirit just put on my heart to do the following. I walked up to the chair where she was restlessly being confined. I bent down to her level. I looked her in the eye and I said, "Lily, I care about you so much and I'm glad you're my student. May I give you a hug?" And she accepted. Lily melted. And after that day, whenever she was about to lose it, I knew what to do. Well, that coach who detained Lily and observed this interaction was voted Teacher of the Year for our state, and she was the speaker for this huge back-to-school event. And in her speech, she shared the story, no names, of course, and how it impacted her to see Lily's response. And I thought, oh, she's talking about me. And this will happen to you, teachers. A colleague will see you interact with a student, speaking their love language, whether they recognize that or not, and they will be amazed at how the student responds to you. So the next love language is words of affirmation. A student with words of affirmation as their love language remembers words spoken, and if they're positive, communicate, I care about you. Conversely, harsh words or short-lived frustration can affect their self-esteem and quickly deplete their love tank. Proverbs says that the power of life and death are in the tongue, and although that may sound extreme, don't underestimate the impact of our words to students with this love language. A few common behaviors you may notice is when a student does something they know is right or pleasing, they look to you for affirmation. And when you authentically compliment these students, their face lights up. When a peer speaks unkindly to them, their reaction is often more dramatic than expected because those harsh words can devastate them. When you've expressed frustration or gotten upset, these students will maybe ask you, are you mad at me? Are you okay? You may notice these students use their words, verbal or written, to encourage their classmates. As a teacher, we can perceive this love language in a few ways. When we have our moments and we raise our voice, showing frustration, you may notice these students pull back emotionally, or they try to distract themselves so as not to experience something that subconsciously is hurting their spirit. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that we can never show emotion, but awareness may prompt us to recognize that for some students, their gauge moves to empty in these situations, and they need a quick fill-up as soon as you have a chance. If they hurt someone or they're hurt by someone's words, they usually apologize quickly or accept the verbal and sincere apology of their peers. However, if they're running on empty, they may be more reluctant to do that. So, how can we express love to students with the language of words of affirmation? Well, these students flourish and thrive academically when we give specific and positive feedback connected to their learning. If you verbally express value for something they do, they will repeat that action over and over because your affirming words fill their love tank. As teachers, we have many ways that we collectively celebrate our students, intentionally expressing gratitude or even giving classmates the opportunity to uplift one another. Those are meaningful to all students, but to your words of affirmation, kids, yeah, this is gold. Gold to their spirit. Although we have to be careful about favoritism, a positive note in a folder at the end of the day, discovered when the student gets home, can be a megaphone of expressing love to him or her, especially if they've had a rough day. Students with this love language enjoy conversations with their teacher. When a teacher is able to joke around, or for older students, engage in appropriate sarcasm, you are going to see these students not only participate, but light up. You know, all students need encouragement, but just looking for opportunities to specifically and authentically encourage these students will bring out the best in them. And may I ask you to keep something else in mind? When a student with this love language is verbally assaulted by a peer, the hurt goes very deep. It can be easily etched in their minds for a long time. So when you perceive this love language in your students, and if this happens, make every effort to counter those lies that were spoken over him or her and replace them with truth. When I reflect on my students with words of affirmation as their love language, I think of Caleb. Caleb seemed to never stop talking. He was a boy with many words, disrupting other students and me often. Caleb would often stand next to me when I was on recess duty, and he didn't always know how to start the conversation, but I quickly realized that what he was seeking was a few minutes to talk to me. It just took one question. He had a story to tell me all about himself doing something really good or really cool. And when I learned to identify something specific in his story that I could compliment, oh man, his face would light up. I recognized his need for affirmation. Well, it happened. He messed up. I spoke in a harsh but appropriate teacher voice. And when I did this, he was crushed. I realized I didn't need to use this approach with Caleb. Caleb thrived in my classroom once I figured out how important my words of affirmation were, and he was better able to use self-control with his own words and actions in the classroom. Next love language, quality time. This love language is best described as focused individual attention, to which every teacher is thinking, yeah, right, I can really do that. But wait, there's more. I have some helpful tips that are reasonable and they'll work. You see, quality time is just our presence. It's our willingness to take a moment just to be with a student, which says to them, I like you and I like being around you. So students who perceive love in this way notice and appreciate eye contact. We're probably all guilty of using eye contact in ways that would be perceived as negative, such as reprimanding or giving instructions for the second or third or fourth time. But for a student with this love language, when we look at them while speaking, demonstrated by our engaged presence, they perceive that as love. Now, obviously, we are limited in our opportunity to do things with individual students, but when these students are playing a math game, for example, and we just offer to take a turn with them, that means a lot to these students. Students who volunteer for class jobs that give them more time with you, staying back for a few minutes at recess to help you clean, they're indicating they desire attention and time with you. If their love tank is empty and attention is the only thing that will fill it, they may go to almost any length to get attention they crave, even if it's negative. Students who focus on a particular classmate and vying for their time as a working partner may be feeling empty. If a student appears to manipulate, I know this has never happened to you, manipulate a conversation with you so that you need to stay longer with them, this can indicate that they are running on fumes. Quality time isn't easy in the classroom setting. So here's some simple practices that I think will go a long way for you. Many teachers have routines that celebrate individual students. I had a student VIP each week. Everyone got a turn and they got to choose from a menu of special activities. And one of those choices was having lunch with me. Well, students with this love language, they always chose this, soaking up the individual attention. If you have classroom jobs and there's ones that need to be done during the first 5 minutes of the day, your students with this love language will gladly give up time with their peers to be with you, even if they're picking up the classroom floor or sharpening pencils. Since quality time is difficult to find in a classroom of students, just looking for opportunities between classes and maybe middle school, high school to invite a student to stand next to you for a brief conversation can quickly and efficiently fill up a student's emotional tank. And then one final suggestion is when you monitor your room, during work time, maybe just stop by their desk for a moment. Or in those rare moments that you're able to individually interact with a student because they've walked up to you alone, just give them eye contact. Intentionally listen. Maybe ask a follow-up question so they know you're engaged. Now, of course, we have to keep in mind that we cannot feel guilty if we're not able to find time for these students. There's one of us. But I have discovered that those students who really craved my presence, just giving them the smallest window of time would fill them up, contributing to their success as a learner. So when I think of loving my students with this love language, I think of Sarah. She seemed to know when I had a moment to myself because when I turned around, she was there with a question or a comment that almost felt like an excuse to get my attention. I learned that responding to her with, "I don't have time to talk right now, Sarah," would actually change her countenance. See, those words, "I don't have time," hurt her. I had to learn to say things like, "You know what, Sarah? I need to take care of something right now. Can I stop by your desk as soon as I'm done and answer your question?" This small tweak in my response and then follow through said, "I care about you, you're important," and she felt loved. The next love language is gifts. This is described as a tangible expression of appreciation or achievement. Students who perceive love in this way are sensitive to the act of giving, and if something is given as a bribe or given conditionally or without sincerity, it may not be received in the way that fills up their love tank. Students with this love language may display a gift on their desk. If you have a way to tangibly reward students for academic or behavior success, such as a prize box or certificates or choosing a coupon that can be exchanged for something, these gifts will excite and motivate these students with this love language. You may also observe that these students like to give gifts. They will bring items to school to give to peers or you, and they will be genuinely happy for others when they receive gifts. And due to the nature of this love language, it's not always easy to recognize if a student's running on empty due to a lack of receiving perceived love through gifts. But if a student brings things to give classmates and you observe their desire to get something in return, they may be running on empty. If a student's response to receiving something tangible is exaggerated, this may be an indication as well. Likewise, not getting something they think they deserve can result in an unexpected negative response. So, how can this work in the classroom? Again, yes, this can be tricky, but I hope these spark your own ideas. For students who perceive love in this way, when you have an opportunity to give something, do it enthusiastically. Your pleasure and excitement to give something speaks love to these students. When circumstances allow for a student to receive a tangible gift, letting them choose can be very powerful because the gift is so much more meaningful to them than most of their peers. For these students, it often takes them a long time to choose because they want to get just the right thing for themselves. They might even choose a gift and then give it to someone else they think needs cheering up because that's what gifts does for them. A teacher can give intangible gifts, and sometimes just using the language when giving something intangible, such as, I want to give this to you, or this is a gift, can help fill up a student's love tank. An example might be, I'm giving you extra time on the computer because you've been working so diligently on your project. Now keep in mind that it's often just the little things that can make a difference. Handing them a new pencil that took time to sharpen with the words, I wanted to give this to you, means something to them. When I reflect on my students, I'm reminded of Molly. She loved gifts because she would bring items from home and she'd give them to me, even if they were in bad shape. She would bring items to give to her peers. On Friday, students had the opportunity to choose from a treasure chest, and excuse me, and she would ask multiple times during the week, what did you put in that treasure chest, Mrs. Kiso? And if she was particularly excited about an item, it was demonstrated by her enthusiastic facial expressions, her tone of voice, her body language. She loved to get and give gifts. Molly had some significant behavior and learning issues, and it took me a while to figure out what Molly perceived as love, but once I did, I would sometimes just give her something to encourage her. As part of her behavior plan, she could earn small items, which was very motivating to her. Which leads me to an important point. You know, many of us have tracked data on a student as part of a behavior plan, and many times if a student reaches a goal, they receive a positive reward. If you have any autonomy when choosing those rewards, I encourage you to consider the student's love language, because if they receive a reward aligned to what shouts love to them, you will see increased motivation and effort. We've made it to our last love language. It's acts of service, and I'm familiar with this love language because it's mine. My husband knows that loading the dishwasher means way more to me than flowers. If he can perceive my need and meet it without me telling him, oh man, that is bonus points. Now, in return, I love to do things for people. Nothing makes me more happy than serving others. Now, for students who light up when you do something for them, or you notice that they like to help their peers, they may have acts of service as their love language. These students often ask more frequently, can you help me? Sometimes they may not really need your help, but your help speaks love to them. These students may also ask, can I help my friend? You will notice these students, whether it is a challenging academic or a physical task, if you step in and you reduce their load, their faces will light up. I mean, they'll express gratitude. They'll try to convince you to help them as long as you're willing. And if they ask for help and we respond, oh, you're smart, you can do it yourself, they may give you a downcast look because they were looking for your help to fill their love tank. Students who show unusual frustration when they can't do something and they're not getting the help they feel they need, they may show a more dramatic emotional response, indicating that they're running on an empty tank. And sometimes if they're feeling depleted, they'll get hyper-focused on helping their classmates, forgetting their own responsibilities in an effort to fill their empty love tank. So how does this work in the classroom? Well, students with this love language are not only aware of acts of service, but also the attitude in which it's given. If your help is accompanied with frustration or impatience, the student may not receive it as perceived love. On the other hand, if you give with a happy heart, even if it's just a small act, you are fueling their love tank. Students with this love language will easily help other students. In fact, at times they can be more willing to help others than take care of their own responsibilities. And when they're serving their peers, noticing it and thanking them fills their love tank. Often classrooms have opportunities to serve the school or the student body as a part of a campus community, as the campus community. When those opportunities present themselves, whether it is a campus cleanup or helping younger students, ask these students to take a leadership role. When they get to be servant leaders and the value of their service is noticed, oh boy, that's worth half a tank. And then finally, acts of service can also work in the classroom by an awareness of seizing the moment. For these students, when you recognize they're struggling with an academic task and you initiate help before they get too frustrated, this speaks loudly to their soul. Rather than share a personal anecdote for this last love language, I'm going to share a few things I learned as I purposed to identify and fuel up the love tanks of my students. First, we want to be thoughtful to include all 5 love languages in our practice, especially prior to getting to know our students, to determine the specific way they fuel the love. Secondly, sometimes, depending on the student's age, it is appropriate to verbally acknowledge what their language is and just let the students know we understand their need. And then third, we don't want to overdo it. We can't go overboard catering to students just to keep them from getting upset or mistreating another student or keeping them motivated academically. There's still going to be times of struggle, and we need to help them develop the emotional strategies they need to work through their feelings, even when they're running on empty. Know this, teachers, that much of what we do will occur organically with most students, but adding this as a tool in our toolkit will allow us to be intentional with those students who need fueling to experience success in the classroom. So maybe you've already drawn some conclusions on what you think might happen in your classroom as a result of applying the principles and practices I've been sharing. You may be asking, is learning and applying the love languages worth it? Well, I think so. And based on my experience, I was able to reach students that other colleagues could not. Even in the collegiate classroom, there's a place for filling the emotional tanks of my students. Now, one of the challenges we face in American classrooms is meeting the needs of individual students. We know the value of differentiation. And using love languages allows us to meet the unique emotional needs of students. Differentiating when we recognize they're running on empty can set students up for success. We want our students to grow academically and emotionally and socially. And when we require growth with awareness of their unique way of perceiving loves, our students, they will be more receptive, more cooperative, willing to try. And this leads to self-efficacy. Research tells us that students with self-efficacy are more likely to take on challenging tasks, be more intrinsically motivated, believe they can overcome difficulty with effort. I mean, can you imagine a classroom with empowered students like that? When our students are struggling, if we learn to ask ourselves, are they running on empty? And if so, what can we do about it? Unwelcomed issues can often be mitigated before they escalate. Simple awareness of our words and actions through the lens of love languages can make all the difference, positively or negatively, for a student and the outcome of a situation. So, I know that's a lot of information, and I do thank you for taking this journey with me. I know that it has been a road, but I do hope that the stops that we have made on this road are meaningful to you. I hope that you have found one or more points of application for your classroom. And my prayer is that you'll personalize this for your particular place in education. Many years after the original Love Language book came out, Gary Smalley wrote one for children, and although adaptations are needed for the classroom, this can be a helpful tool as well. I want to leave you 3 final action steps. The first one is personal. Would you take a moment while this information is fresh in your mind and just determine how you can make this personal for you in your classroom? What's one thing you can add or change in your classroom to fuel the love tanks of your students? Second, can you ask God to show you how to love your students best? I can't emphasize enough that just simply asking God to give you insight and discernment and sensitivity and wisdom to love your students in the way they perceive love, it will go a long way. I know it did for me. And then preparation. We all know that effective preparation is a key to our teaching success. And if you wish to apply this, make a plan to give it a try, just a little bit at a time. And if you have any questions, if you'd like to discuss this further with me, you're more than welcome to email me. As I said at the start, I'm passionate about this because it has been my experience as both a K-12 teacher and college professor that it works. It works. So God bless you in your efforts to bring love languages to your classroom.
Wow, Michelle, thank you so much. That was super powerful. You know what? It struck me as you were teaching that, a little bit my own story. I used to tell my kids and others that I got into teaching because I love my subject. I stayed teaching because I love my students. And it's that student connection, right, that helps us to stay year after year being excited about, okay, who's God bringing in my classroom and what is God going to do in their lives? And I'm convinced that this session is going to help many teachers stay in their mission field of our schools for longer because they are better able to connect with their students, and that connection kind of drives us in many ways. And I think I want to say one more thing about that because that can also be kind of an unhealthy thing too, right? Sometimes as educators, especially if we're kind of coming from a needy place, if we're coming from a place of not being filled up ourselves, we go to school and we sometimes feel the need to get our love tank filled from students, right? And that can manifest in a whole host of unhealthy behaviors, just from simply ineffective classroom management to things that are, of course, even much worse than that. And I want a question I have for you is how do we kind of get filled up, with our love tank, in a sense, separate from school, separate from our role as teachers, so that when we come to our classroom, I'm aware that we get love from our students and that encourages us, but that should be bonus, right? That should be sort of like extra. If that's sort of meeting a basic need, we're in trouble. So how do we kind of get filled up in our lives before we come to school so that we're not coming to school from a place of need?
Well, a couple of ways. First, I encourage us to become aware of the love languages and to the best of our ability share this with the people in our lives that are important, whether that be spouses or friends or otherwise. Because once you begin to share love languages with one another, you give, you also receive. One thing that I have learned about love languages and people I know who are struggling, they feel empty and they're saying, well, I feel empty. How am I supposed to go to the class and pour out? Well, the Bible talks a lot about how God's love for us is so lavish, that he has poured his love in us. The word is actually he pours his love in us. And so we have to learn to posture ourselves before the Lord and allow him to pour his love into us through worship and prayer and his word. And the Bible also tells us that that which we sow, we will reap. And so many times, if we will sow love, even when we are empty, God will bring that back in unexpected ways. And sometimes, if we will be so intentional to love, even when it's difficult to love because we're on empty, do you know that we start filling up others who are empty, and then they have overflow, and that overflow actually falls back onto us?
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Wow, profound, Michelle. I love that verse in the scriptures, Romans 5:5. I pray it over people all the time. It describes how the Holy Spirit pours the love of the Father, just like you said, pours the love of the Father into our hearts by the power of the Spirit. And And I just, yeah, pray for that all the time because, yeah, we can't go in needy, right? We got to go in filled up with Jesus. And so I love that. Thank you, Michelle. Wonderful, wonderful answer. One other thing I want to say is that this session, by the way, as Michelle spoke, and we haven't recorded this one yet, but I know it's coming. This links up really well with Don Rao's session for Rise Up. So those of you that felt, hey, this was really good, I want more, go ahead and check out Don Rao's session as well. I think you're going to really enjoy that one also. And then Michelle, would you close us by praying over our Rise Up audience today?
I will. Father, I thank you for every teacher who has participated in this session. Father, I thank you that they are loved lavishly by you. And I pray in this moment that they will sense in their spirit that you are pouring love on them. Lord, I ask that you would reveal to them how they can take this amazing love that you have offered us and translate this into their classroom. Father, would you give the teachers wisdom, revelation, and insight on how to perceive the love languages of their students, how to recognize that they are on empty, and then how to respond to them in such a unique and individual way that the students in their classroom get to run on a full tank, that their students will be the ones that are always moving forward because they know how much they are loved. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right, thanks again, Michelle. And for those of you watching out there, be sure to check out the page and the resources below. And again, Michelle's invited you to contact her, so feel free to do that. And I would add one thing. If you've never experienced the love of the Father being poured into you, I would encourage you to reach out to Michelle. And I know that she would love to pray for you in that. Or if you just want more mentoring or encouragement of how to apply this in your classroom, I just think of the millions of students out there that are just waiting to be loved according to their love languages, and the thousands of teachers who are going to meet those needs in their hearts, and what God is going to do as a result. So, such an amazing, powerful thing. So, thank you all for watching, and may the rest of your Rise Up sessions be also as powerful and as encouraging to you. And we are praying for you as you step out in your classroom, showing who God is to a hurting and broken generation. All right, thank you very much for being with us.